Hi, it's Summer and this is my March wrap up. I read 10 books in March. I had some really great ones. I had some not so great ones, so I'm just going to tell you about all of them. In March, a few of my book besties had a readathon. It was called Let's Get Graphic Readathon. It was for reading graphic novels, manga, all of that kind of stuff. So I participated in that, and I'm going to, I think first just show you all of the graphic novels that I read this month, most of them being for the Let's Get Graphic Readathon. First, I will talk about The Tea Dragon Society by Kay O'Neill, or I guess Katie O'Neill. This is volume 1 in this graphic novel series. It's just a very whimsical, cute, sweet story about these tea dragons that are kind of rare now, and they grow plants out of their head where their horns are, and you can brew magical tea with those clippings. There used to be this society called the Tea Dragon Society, and it kind of dwindled out, and so now all of these people and friends are coming together to kind of like restart the Tea Dragon Society. Just like I said, very sweet, beautiful, beautiful illustrations. I love this art style. I gave this one 5 stars. Next, I have The Sprite and the Gardener by Rhea Abrego and Joe Witt. The art style in here, again, is just absolutely beautiful. So pretty. I actually buddy read this for the readathon with my friend Zoe, and she's actually the one who gifted me this for my birthday. So it was really fun to like read this together and talk about it and stuff. We both loved the illustrations. We both loved that there was a plus-sized Sprite included in this. It's just a really cute, beautiful, wholesome story. I feel like the first line of this book says it all. It says, "In the distant, distant past, sprites were the caretakers of life." So they used to be like the caretakers of nature and all that kind of stuff, but then when humans came along, humans started taking care of nature, and so the sprites didn't really need to anymore. So this one is about a sprite. I'm pretty sure her name is Wisteria, and she starts kind of tending to a garden, and it's very cute. And I also gave this one 5 stars. This one I'm not really sure if it's classified more as like a children's book or a picture book or a graphic novel, but it's Fairyopolis, A Flower Fairy's Journal. This is a book from my childhood that I wanted to pick up for the Let's Get Graphic Readathon, but also for my fairy reading vlog, which this one also really fits in for. But Let's Get Graphic took place the same week that I was filming my fairy reading vlog, so I talk about all 3 of these. So if you want any more in-depth thoughts, you can kind of check that video out. But this one is like a scrapbook journal of this woman named Cicely, who is staying at either her friend or her sister's house somewhere in England, and she's kind of like tending to her house and her garden, and she starts to suspect that there might be fairies around her. And she's an artist, so she's kind of like painting in the pages. There are like these 3D aspects to it. It's a really fun interactive book. It doesn't have the strongest plot or storyline. It's mostly just kind of like an experience to be had. So I give this one a 4 out of 5 stars, but I still really loved it. After that, I read Olympus by Rachel Smythe. I started this one for Let's Get Graphic, but I finished it a few weeks after. This one is a graphic novel based on Hades and Persephone. It is reminding me a lot of, is it called Neon Gods? Where it's kind of like modern Greek mythology. That's kind of the vibe this is giving me. I didn't love Neon Gods, but not because of the mythology aspect, because of like the weird romance stuff happening. But anyway, this, like I said, follows Hades and Persephone. In this volume, they meet. You also kind of see some of their like relationships with the other gods and goddesses. There are some like really dark themes in this book actually too, so definitely look into triggers before you start this. The art style is really fun. It's all like blue and pink tones. I did find myself getting really confused though, because this just throws you right in, expecting you to understand and have a lot of knowledge on Greek mythology already, which I do not. I have like a very basic understanding of it, pretty much just to the point of knowing like who Hades and Persephone are. Also, if you can hear Markle yelling at me in the background, I'm so sorry. Despite being confused, I still had a fun time reading this. I do want to pick up the 2nd volume, and I gave this one 4 stars. Next, I'm going to talk about another book that I read for my fairy blog. That is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia Fairies by Heather Fawcett. Can I just start off by saying that I absolutely loved this book. This is 5 stars. I loved it. I can't stop thinking about it. I just want to be back in this world. I love the characters. I love the tropes. For this one on Goodreads, I said I loved this book. So cozy, whimsical, and atmospheric. I absolutely loved all of the characters. It was so fun seeing their development through the book. And the banter between the 2 main characters, so good. If I was being picky, there were some things about the ending that could have made this book a 4.5, but I loved the vibes and how I felt while reading so much that it just has to be a 5. If you want a cozy winter fairy book told in epistolary form with a grumpy sunshine romance, you need to pick this up. And that's pretty much all you need to know about it. Also, if you need to be convinced further, this is my aesthetic reel that I made for it. Very cozy winter autumnal. There's also a dog in this book named Shadow that is just the cutest. And I also just have to say, this is one of the most atmospheric books that I've ever read. It just made me feel cold, and I loved hearing about them like chopping the firewood and making their little cabin that they were staying in cozy. I loved hearing about their treks to go out and try to converse with fairies and stuff like that. Lots of winter vibes, but I wouldn't say it's Christmas vibes. I think that you could still get away with reading this if you're a mood reader and like a seasonal reader. I think that you could get away with reading this in like the early spring. I also just felt like every single emotion while reading this, including just feeling shocked, because there was one scene, maybe in like the middle or to the end of the book, I don't really remember for sure, but my jaw like actually dropped. I was like cringing away from the page because I was like, oh my gosh. And like, I don't know, it was just really fun having this book get a reaction out of me. I also just really loved Emily's character and her character development. And I love the contrast between her and Bramblebee, I'm pretty sure is his last name. You'd think for me loving this book so much I would remember the characters' names better, but I don't. I just really loved this. I'm obsessed with it. I want to read it again. Please pick this one up. After that, I have another 5-star, and it's A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking by T. Kingfisher. This one is a cozy fantasy, and I would actually also say that Emily Wilde is a cozy fantasy. So apparently I'm just in my cozy fantasy era right now, and I never want to leave. So in this fantasy world, there has been magic in the past, but it's kind of like dwindled down to the point where there's only kind of like basic common magic left. The magic is very like small and specific. So this main character, I literally already forgot her name. She's 14 and she works in her aunt and uncle's bakery, but her magic that she has is to manipulate bread dough and like other types of like pastries and stuff like that. Like if she accidentally like over kneads some dough, she can make it so that it's not tough anymore and that it'll be normal bread dough. She can use her magic to help things from burning. She uses her magic to animate her gingerbread men to dance. And a lot of people come to the bakery just to see the dancing gingerbread men, that kind of a thing. But that's like the extent of her magic. There's also another character named, I think, Knackering Molly. I don't know why I remember her name, probably because it's a really weird one. But her oddly specific magic is that she can control the bones of dead horses. So very quirky magic system. But one day this main character wakes up and goes to the bakery and finds a dead person there, and she gets taken in as a suspect for the murder. That's just like scratching the surface though. There's so many other things that happen in this book. She ends up meeting this kind of like orphaned kid named Spindle, and they kind of like work together and have this friendship. There's a sourdough starter named Bob, and I would die for Bob. There is a scene where you learn about what Bob eats, and it had me on the floor. I was dying. Like this book, I laughed out loud so many times. It was genuinely one of the funniest, most charming books that I've read. And it's funny because the main thing that I know T. Kingfisher from is horror novels. So the fact that they write cute, cozy fantasy books that are funny, I just cannot believe that range that they have. I also love how creative this book is. There are some things, especially towards the end, where the characters kind of have to think outside of the box, and I just really loved seeing that whole process. I really loved like the kind of like main theme that is in this book, where it's like, even if you don't think you're special or that you're good enough, you're special in your own way and you have a lot to bring to the table. Like even if you have small, really specific, unique magic, it can be used in big ways. And I just really loved it. I loved this book. 5 stars. I just couldn't believe that I had 2 5 stars back to back, because I read Emily Wilde and then this one right after. And I was like, this is just the best reading month ever. If you liked Legends and Lattes, you need to read this because it kind of feels like the middle grade version of Legends and Lattes a little bit. Definitely the same energy. I love any book that has like baking and stuff like that in it. So yeah, I just highly recommend this one as well. Okay, and now we're getting into my rereads, which I'm so excited to talk about. In March, I decided to start rereading Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas, mainly because a lot of other people are reading this for the first time right now, and a lot of my friends are also rereading the series. I think mainly because the new covers just came out, so it's kind of like inspiring people to get back into this world. And I've needed to do a reread for a long time, so this is fun that it's finally happening. I think that literally everyone knows what this book is about. On the off chance that you don't though, this is about Celaena Sardathian. She is an assassin, and she is selected to compete in these games or like a tournament, a challenge to become the king's assassin, and she's fighting other assassins and killers and stuff like that. And if she becomes the king's assassin, she's going to win her freedom after being in service to him for a few years. And there are just like a lot of really creepy dark secrets happening in this castle that she's kind of like uncovering alongside competing in this competition. And I'm just going to read what I said on Goodreads about it. I put the date that I finished it and said that it was my first time rereading it, and I said it was so good. Probably not 5 stars like the first time that I read it, but definitely at least a 4. So much happened in this book that I had forgotten about, and there were so many Easter eggs for future books that were fun to rediscover and realize. I definitely think that Nehemia deserved way more credit than she got in this one, like for sure. So that's something that I had an issue with, but it's just so fun to be back in this world, and it's the perfect time for me to be rereading it because I'm getting a Throne of Glass tattoo in just a couple of weeks. It's actually this week now, which is crazy. I know that Sarah J Maas is polarizing, but her books and characters are so special to me, and I'm so happy to have reread the first book of hers that I was introduced to. So I just had the best time reading this again, but it was closer to 4 stars for me. And then after that, I read Crown of Midnight, book number 2. This was so much better than I even remembered it. 5 stars, 1000%. On Goodreads, I said 5 stars. I don't even know what to say besides that I loved this. Still how I feel. This book, the relationships just keep growing. A lot of shocking things happened. And I think my favorite part about both the first book and this one are the creepy passages and creatures that Selena is dealing with. It was also really fun in this one to see Selena in action even more than the first book. But I love the characters. I love, again, kind of like realizing things from later in the books that are mentioned so early on as Easter eggs. Like, you can just tell there was a lot of thought put into the storyline and plot of all these books together. I'm currently reading Heir of Fire, so keep an eye out for that in my next wrap up, probably. All right, and now we're getting into the 2 stars that I read this month. I only have 2 of them, so that's good. The first one that I will talk about is If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. I actually buddy read this one with my friend Jessie, and we both kind of had the same feelings about it. I think that she gave it a 3 out of 5, and I gave it a 2. But this is dark academia, and it has a lot of Shakespeare in it. On Goodreads, I said, I don't think I'm passionate enough about theater for this book. I was bored for almost all of it, and the friend group's problem from the first bit of the book could have been fixed so easily. So I felt like I had to suspend disbelief for the rest of it. I don't really know if that makes sense, but I also just felt like I was reading about a bunch of cringe theater kids that talk to each other in a Shakespearean way outside of rehearsal, and I didn't care about any of them. I think to enjoy this one, you have to be familiar with Shakespeare, which I wasn't. The very ending was kind of cool, but not enough to save this book for me. I've seen adaptations of Shakespeare and I've read Shakespeare, but I'm not like really familiar with it enough to recognize quotes that were in this book or to really understand the plot of a lot of the plays that were mentioned in here. And don't get me wrong, I do like theater. I really enjoy certain plays and musicals and stuff, and I was involved in the theater program when I was in high school. From a costuming perspective though, not so much as like a performing aspect. But I just don't think this book was for me. My Goodreads review said it all. 2 stars. And then the last book that I read in March was The Villa by Rachel Hawkins. I read this one for the Sleep When I'm Dead book club. So like I said, 2 stars, and all I said on Goodreads for this one was boring / bad pacing and not a thriller. This one is dual POV, but it's mainly following this character whose name I don't remember. She gets invited by her friend to go and stay in this villa in Italy and just stay there for like a month or something and work on their writing because they're both authors. Her friend is more of like a self-help author, and the main character writes like a cozy mystery series, but she has not had inspiration. She's been kind of like in a writing slump, so she thinks this trip is going to be a good time for her to finally kind of get back into writing her series. As they're staying there though, they kind of like learned about the history of this villa and a murder that happened there back in the 70s. But you're hearing current day about the main character learning about the murder that happened in the 70s, and then in the other perspective, you're hearing firsthand the 70s murder perspective. But it's not a thriller. It's just kind of like a boring character study mystery, but I didn't even really feel like I knew the characters very well by the end, so I don't know if like character study is the right word. It almost kind of gave me like Taylor Jenkins Reid vibes a little bit, especially like the 70s perspective kind of gave me like Daisy Jones and the Six kind of vibes. Also, the main thing that we all agreed on in the like live show discussion for this book was that this book being set in Italy didn't have anything to do with the story really. Like, this book could have been set anywhere. So it was kind of sad that the setting wasn't like utilized more, I guess. So yeah, this book was fine. I wouldn't recommend it. 2 stars. I'm sorry that I ended that on a bad note, but please go read Emily Watt's Encyclopedia Fairies. Please read A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking. They were so good. 5 stars, new favorite books. And then I also just got to reread some of my all-time favorite books. So this was definitely one of my favorite reading months that I've ever had. I'm just really happy with pretty much everything that I read. If you made it to this point in the video, leave a fairy emoji in the comments, and also let me know what your favorite book that you read in March was. But thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.